feel like he's going to kill me one day. And my dad came, he and my mom were having issues. I mean, really, because Mel was basically leading our household. So he's like, I'm going to go with you because I'm leaving your mom. And so we decided we're going to leave together. We get in the car, we drive to South Florida. We get in a one-bedroom efficiency apartment. We don't have jobs. And it was great. And we got away. We didn't tell anyone where we went. We didn't tell my mother because we knew we would tell him. But we were going to get on our feet and figure things out. And, of course, what is the most natural thing that I would do? I'm sitting on the bench with my dad at the beach, and a guy comes up to me, and he's like, hey, do you need a job? I'm like, yeah, I do need a job. He goes, well, you would be a great Hooters waitress. So here, I'm going to give you a card, and come tonight, and I'll give you a job. So what is a girl who thinks that all you have to do is smile and look pretty? I'll work at Hooters. Okay. Once again, using my body. And not that I think those things about me, but that's what was happening. That's all I had to offer. So I'm working at Hooters. Me and my dad are living in this apartment. We finally tell my mom after a few months where we are because my dad felt bad and it was dangerous. She didn't know where we were. We would stay in contact. As soon as we told her where we are, Mel showed up in Hooters. And I was in the middle, like we did these promotions. It's like the Dan Marino show, which is so funny because he was another one. But not with me, but he was a dandy. So he showed up, pulled me out of there, and how dare you? You're Mel Hall's fiance. How dare you work at Hooters? Like taking ownership. Anyway, got back into the relationship. I'm going to bring your family together. I'm going to get a house. We're all going to live together, becoming the savior once again. And so stayed in a relationship with him for another few months. And then one night, he said he was going to go out to get donuts. And I told my sister, I said, he always believes, like if if a girl picks up a phone, he'll convince me it's a maid. And I could never catch him. But if I could just catch him being not inappropriate, but cheating, because we were in a relationship, I could say, I see it, and I know who you are, and I can get out of it. So one night he says he's going to go get donuts, but I knew he was talking to this limo driver all day long, who was like his pimp. I don't know. Like he would always bring women, I guess, to him, I find out. And so I'm like, I know he's been talking to Brick all day, and I bet we can catch him. So my parents are sleeping. We get in the car. My sister's like, I'm not going. I'm like, well, I'm going to lunch. She goes, then I'll go with you. I get in the car, and I said, I know when his wife comes in, his ex-wife, who he had a daughter with, and who he left at that time when I was 15. He left her. We didn't know he was married. We found out in the New York Post. That's a side note. I go, I know when she flies in, he always goes to this hotel. So let's just go to this hotel. Sure enough, and I feel like it was just ordained by God because I needed proof. I went to this hotel, and right when we pull in, he pulls in. There's a woman in the car, and he tries to take off and hide in a parking garage. And I got out of the car, and I just kept saying, all I could remember is I kept saying, I see it, and you cannot lie anymore. I see it. I see who you are, and that's all I needed. And then we called the police, and my parents saw how distraught I was. Because even people that are victimized, they're still hurt because I was in this relationship with him. So I was still like, oh my goodness, you're such a liar, but you caged me up for 3 years. So please come, and I've never seen him until the trial. I got out of that relationship. I still thought it was a dysfunctional relationship. I didn't look at it as I was a victim or I was sexually abused. I just felt like I was in a really dysfunctional relationship with my family being involved and this person, and I kind of just pushed it out of my mind. I ended up becoming a Christian when I was 20 years old, a couple of years later, and of course I was a broken person, and I didn't know where to go, and I didn't know how to feel whole because I was so damaged, and I didn't understand what I was dealing with. So I was seeking, and I was like, why do I feel so messed up? And it's so long. So I was seeking, and that is when everything changed. And I started going to this church, and I was overwhelmed by forgiveness because I felt such shame. And victims don't say anything because they have so much shame. I just need a minute. So, I just thought it was me. And so anyway, I became a Christian. I saw that I had a loving Father, and He was forgiving me, and I was able to release that. And this has been such a journey for me, but that was the beginning of it. And then I just started growing and learning who I was. And I wasn't Mel Hall's fiance, and I wasn't my father's daughter. And I was a child of God, and I was forgiven, and that was huge for me. And then slowly the layers started healing, and I started realizing something happened more than a dysfunctional relationship. So I went to some counseling and kind of put a Band-Aid on it. I met my husband at church, and he treated me like a man should treat a woman. And we had a pure relationship until we got married. And I shared my damage, and I would see in his face like shock. And he was like, "Okay, this is kind of a big deal." And I'm like, I know. I need to go to counseling. And I would go to like church and get counseling, but it wasn't enough because I didn't really understand what I was dealing with. And then we get married, and we have 3 amazing children. We got married in 2000, and then we started, our first child was 2001. And then I held this baby, and then another layer comes off. I'm like, how do you put a baby in harm's way? And then I have a daughter, and another layer comes off. And the day she was born, I told my husband in the emergency, in the labor room, I feel like a part of me was healed when I had a daughter, and I have a chance to fix it. And then we have our 3rd child, and so layers keep coming off. But I still don't understand that I was with a pedophile, and I was victimized, and he's a sexual abuser. And then I get a call from my mother, and she tells me, I just want to let you know, Mel is on ESPN, and he got arrested. I mean, I can't believe it. He was such a good guy. I mean, surely these girls are just, lying. And I was in the middle. We had just had we were pregnant with our 4th child, and I had just miscarried. Literally just got home from the doctor. Was completely devastated, and I was a little raw. And she calls me about this Sports Illustrated article. And then she saw a banner on ESPN, and that was the first time that I just lost my mind with her. And I could use other words, but I won't. And I was like, he was not a good man. And I've told you he's not a good man, and I don't understand how you could defend him. And do you understand? Do you know? And I just let it all out. And then I got off that phone call with her, and there were several things said and several hurt things said to me. And I got off the phone, and I dealt with our miscarriage. And a week later, I thought about that phone call, and I said, I just need to call someone. Maybe I should start with Fairfield Police, because that's where the crime happened. It's a crime. He's a criminal. He's a pedophile. And I kept telling my husband, he did this to other girls. Why didn't I do something? Why didn't I say something? But I just never dreamed I thought it was just our dysfunctional relationship. I never dreamed I never checked up on him. I never Googled him. And so I said, now I feel like responsible. I have to do something. And that's when I called Fairfield Police, and they said, well, we know who you are. We remember everything. But the time has passed. There's nothing you can do. And then that's when I got a call from Kim.
Yeah. So, I have been looking for this story, and it's just one of those moments. When you're a prosecutor, you know them. There are times that it's better to be lucky than good, right? Like, this all came together in a perfect moment. But I remember, first off, hearing a little bit, because my investigator was like, okay, so this is what's going on. And I remember, and I said this to Chaz, God bless her, I go, I expected you to be super crazy. Right? Because how do you have this story, and how do you come out the other side and not be into what we all see, drugs? I mean, you know when it goes the other way. And that's kind of what I think I'm going to get, because when you have a family that didn't give you the support, and let's be clear, take a minute and think about being abused in front of literally millions of people and no one caring. Because that's what Chaz's story really is. And what makes me angry to this day when you start talking about this case is it goes back to that line you hear, well, Mel Hall likes him young. Not Mel Hall's a pedophile. Mel Hall likes him young. there is this idea in our society that, well, I mean, she's 15 and, I mean, I guess we could see she's attractive, so it's fine. It's not fine. And no one figures that out in this story until he continues to sleep with 13, 14, 15-year-old girls. He didn't change. He was the same person with Chaz. It was just out in the open, as he ultimately was with Courtney, with Katie, with all of these girls. That is his target age. And so I think a lot of times, and we see it in law enforcement, you get I mean, she's 16, she's 17. I've said it, we've all said it. But there's more to that story, and to meet Chaz and talk to Chaz and understand that it's more than she was 16, she was in a consensual relationship. There's no consent when the power dynamics are that different. And if you take nothing else away from this talk, I hope you gut check yourself sometimes when you're dealing with these cases. And remember, that's still a 14, 15, 16-year-old girl. They don't have the capability to make good decisions. And they're not making true decisions if someone's in a position of power or authority over them. So we get this call, and I could not believe it. As a prosecutor, the idea that the whole Yankees organization, like everyone just looked the other way, it was just mind-blowing. And we looked into it. Like, statute of limitations had passed. There was nothing I could do for Chaz's case in particular. But I knew how important this story was to our trial. And so, sight unseen, I said, Chaz, I've got a trial coming up, and I really want you to testify. And to her credit, she kept up with me while we got ready for trial, because of course it's every trial, things get moved, it takes a while. It takes us about 2 years to get to trial. But she hangs in. And we get to trial, and, anytime you have a multi-victim case, it's a little bit like being a circus leader. Like, you're just trying to balance everybody. Some of these girls know each other, some don't. I'll never forget the moment of walking Chaz in to meet the other girls, because I knew how tough that was going to be. I don't know if she had processed that. I couldn't warn her against it, but I knew that seeing girls who are at the beginning of their how am I going to deal with this journey was going to be upsetting. And these girls seeing Chaz is exactly the opposite. They saw it as inspiring, like, okay, I'm going to come out of this okay. But that moment, we have a waiting room. It's a waiting room with a closed door, and I remember walking in thinking, here we go. Let's just see what happens. But I was so grateful for Chaz to be there, because these girls were nervous and worried, and they're young girls. They're 22, 23. They're all just graduating from college. But to be able to see coming out the other side was important, but even more than that, and those of you who work these cases know what I'm talking about, knowing that they're not the only one is a game changer. It just is. It's a game changer to know, because it helps you to forgive yourself. If it could happen to others, then it wasn't me. I didn't cause this. It helps you understand it's him, not me. So we get to trial in July of 2009. In Texas law, there's a very distinct difference between a child being under 14 and a child being over 14. It's the difference between 5 to 99 and 2 to 20, so it's a big difference. So here's, and this is actually true too. This law actually changed a couple years ago, and man, could I have used it, and I maybe would have slept more in 2009. But at the time, you could only hear about one victim. And so I had to put all my eggs in one basket. There are ways, if they opened the door, if they said, I would never, then I was going to be able to get into other victims. But otherwise, I couldn't get into other victims. That law has changed in Texas now. We can actually get into other victims in child molestation cases, which is huge. But at the time, I couldn't. So I had one victim who I had documented timeline proof was under 14 when it happened, and it was Courtney, who is my shyest victim. It was I can't tell you how many sleepless nights, because I knew. This is a girl that would skip class rather than give a class presentation, and I've got to put her on the stand, literally with the whole world watching. It was kind of a funny trial, because locally, we didn't really, it was a coach, it had that kind of notoriety, but then nationally, ESPN's calling, the New York Times are calling, all these people are calling. So it's kind of weird, because locally, the Star Telegram's so you have a coach case going? And I was like, yeah. But, which leads to a funny moment actually that involves Michael Jackson at the end of this. But, so anyway, so we're going on Courtney's case. She's our one that we could document under 14 at the time of trial. So, what do you do? What do you do when you have a case that is a decade old? How do you corroborate a sexual assault case? This is the key to what all of y'all in law enforcement are always trying to figure out. And it's not easy. And I can't give you good time. Every case is going to be different, but I can tell you what worked for us and what works for me generally in these cases. You can't corroborate the sexual assault. It doesn't happen, with the exception of Chaz, it doesn't happen in the front of a bunch of people. It happens in quiet places, and it happens behind closed doors, and it's kept a secret, and there's no science. I'm not going to be able to prove my case through DNA. That's not how these cases work. So what do you need to do? You need to corroborate everything you can. For us, the real key to our prosecution was corroborating the grooming that people saw. There was a lot of stuff that people saw that we were able to say, see, even back then, people knew something. And if there's one thing I've learned from this, and we're going to talk about this a little bit at the end, but one of the most upsetting parts to me sometimes when I go back and work these kind of cases is when you go to a group, whether it be a church group or a classroom, whatever it is, where there was a child that was molested within that group, when you say to them, hey, there's been an allegation of sexual assault, every single time I've done that, they have guessed which kid it was. What does that tell you? They're seeing stuff. They're seeing stuff that doesn't sit right with them, but we have this idea like, oh, I should stay out of it. It's none of my business. Maybe I saw that wrong. People give all these, but if I say to you, okay, in this classroom there's 30 kids, one kid was molested, and you guess which kid, you saw something. And when I have that conversation, I just think, I know now they're going to get, this is on me. Because the next victim is. The next victim's on them because they didn't say anything. They didn't do anything. That's a hard conversation to have with people. But for trial, it's super important to be able to show what did they see? What did they see that had them understand? You know, getting people to testify about Courtney getting pulled from nationals. Like, did getting pulled from nationals, did they know it was because she was being sexually assaulted? Of course not. But it corroborated what Courtney's story was, and it showed that is strange. Like, why would that happen? We talked about the gifts. There were lots of gifts that we talked about. We talked about the people that she had told beforehand. Now, under hearsay, you can't necessarily, depending on your state laws, you can't necessarily say what the child said to someone. And especially because when Courtney told she was about 18, 19, I couldn't use that as what we call an outcry in Texas. But what you can do is put that person on. And you can say, did you have a conversation with them? Yeah. What was their demeanor? And you can establish for the jury that this didn't come out of thin air in 2007. Like, this girl is telling people what little bit she can get out. Or did something change in her demeanor? What's going on with her? Did you see a change in her schoolwork? These are the kind of things you need to establish because, and you may not have those things, but if you have them, put them in front of the jury. Timelines, lack of motive. That became huge for us because everyone had this idea that these girls were out for money. He didn't have any money, number one. Number two, it kind of goes back to what we were saying with the grooming stuff, like, or with the outcries. Courtney's a lot of things, but one of the things she's not is a master criminal. And so there's no way Courtney could think, you know what I'm going to do? In 2001, I'm going to tell my teacher's aide that this happened to me. And then I'm going to tell her not to tell anybody. And then I'm going to tell my college roommate in 2000, this is going to be great. And then in 2007, I'm going to get Katie to call me and we're going to call come on. But look how important that is. Because whenever there's a big group of kids outcrying or a celebrity figure, we all do it. Like, if I said right now some celebrity name, you would all know that in that moment you had that thought like, why are these kids saying it? Why are these kids saying it? Like, we have to come up with a reason why. It can't just be that they're a pedophile, right? Because what happens to us as a community when it's a celebrity, but especially in families, you'll see this with mothers. When you're dealing with mothers who are staying with their abusing husbands, it's hard to admit that we liked someone who was capable of this. And so when you see these mothers who are staying with their husbands, it's because they can't wrap around their head that this person that they trusted was capable of that. And so they will bury their heads so deep in the sand to avoid dealing with that truth. And we do the same thing with sexual assault in the public eye. Like, think of any celebrity you can think of, the Bill Cosbys, the Sandusky's, any of these people, and we as a community, our very first response is, why are these kids saying it? Not why did he do it? Why are these kids saying it? And we don't believe it until we pulled away enough of the onions to go, like the Bill Cosby thing. We all know the first one kind of came out, we're like, okay. Second one, okay. Third one, uh-oh. Right? Then we had to start reevaluating who Bill Cosby was in our head. And so that's what's true in this case. But when you're in a courtroom, and this was very funny, I wanted to bring it up actually when some of these other conversations, because for those of you who've never gotten to be in a courtroom, it is absurd, really, some of the stuff that takes on importance in a courtroom. Like courtrooms, it's stuff that you think, well, no one would ever believe that. That's a ridiculous defense. Ta-da! Somehow in a courtroom, people are like, I mean, maybe. Let's talk about that. You're like, what? Like when I talk about abusive head trauma, and people are like, it's probably a vaccine. And what? No. This really happened. It's so hard when I sit down with doctors and nurses and I have to go, okay, so the defense is going to ask you about a vaccine. And doctors are like, but his head was bleeding. I'm like, I get it. Just stick with me. It's kind of the same idea. So now I will say the best thing that ever happened to child abuse prosecution, anyone know? The smartphone. The smartphone and social media has been a game changer. This, of course, happened before any of that. But I will tell you what, people are foolish on social media. So nowadays, if there is ever a case and you have any ability to get to the social media and their computer and their cell phone, do it. Do it. And here's the thing I've learned. Sorry, online audience, but like everyone in the world takes a picture of their junk now. Everyone. Because it doesn't matter what case I'm working, like, oh, it's a robbery. Oh, look. Every time. So get to their phones. We didn't have that ability. We had it with just the one girl, with Sarah, because she was in 2007. In 1999, these girls didn't have cell phones. We didn't have that. But get to it, because this is gold every time. I made a guy one time. I was actually a youth pastor, and he wrote this terrible poetry to this 13-year-old girl. It's terrible. And so I would make him read it out loud on the stand just to show, like, yeah, that's right, you're writing about unicorns, you 40-year-old man. And but it was all on his social media. It was fantastic. Other victims. Double-edged sword, right? You can't go out and seek victims. You can't. You can't go out and say, hey, everybody who's a victim. They have to come to you, or a motive gets created. You do have to be questioning of victims that come forward. You need to make sure you vet these people, because one victim with a motive can sink everybody. And so you've got to vet your victims. Make sure that what they're telling you matches up. Make sure they don't have a motive. Make sure they don't have a lawsuit pending, all of these kind of things when you have these big cases. Once again, we are lucky because Mel Hall had no money, so there was no worry about a lawsuit. By the way, he never gave up on that idea. Even when he was applying for indigency for his appeal, he's like, I'm a million. No, you're not a millionaire. Like, we all know it. We've seen your bank account. But all of this is great. But if you really, really, really want to have a great case, you need victims like Chaz, who kept a box of treasures. She's like, on the phone, she goes, so I have some stuff. Do you want me to bring it to Texas? I was like, yeah, that'd be great. I mean, I just thought it was going to be like, I don't know what I thought it was going to be, but it was unbelievable. And I remember sitting down with her the weekend, and kind of right before trial, and going through this stuff. And like my jaw was just on the table, because everything she said in the story that sounded kind of crazy to y'all, we had proof of. So like, for instance, it's real hard to say you don't know how old someone is when they give you a Sweet 16 birthday card. Yeah, hey Mel Hall, we know how, yeah, you know she's 15 because you're celebrating her 16th birthday. Remember the ring? $35,000, 1990. Right? Like, I have dates, I have address. This is actually her home address in Fairfield, Connecticut is on here. Like, as crazy as all this sounds, it's all true and verifiable. Limo on the first date. This is it, because your parents took a picture. Mm-hmm. They were astounded, like, here comes this man.
Yeah, that was the first day.
Yeah. This is the car he bought. you know. This picture actually became very important at trial because, as Chaz said, he would sleep on this floor. This is literally where the sexual assault started. And in the picture, there's her dad. Just like she describes it. Like this is, and that's another thing you're always going to have to get past in trials is these people absolutely do it in front of people. We have uncles touching kids in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner all the time. And they want to say, oh God, no one, they would never do that in front of yeah, they do it in front of everybody all the time. This is how it happens. They take stolen moments, they take distracted moments, and they molest kids. I don't know if you can see this, but it says, welcome New York Yankees fans and players. There they are, right there. This is on the beach. I mean, I look at this picture and I think, is this what every 15-year-old girl look like? I mean, this is 15. You can see it. You can see how young she is. And everyone looks the other way. She isn't tarting it up, trying to look super old. This is, you know, we're about a year apart. I wore these same Keds and white socks. Like, that's how you dressed when you were 15 in the late 80s, early 90s. This is the picture Chaz talked about. I mean, someone's taking a picture of what is actually an abusive moment. And you can see it. You can see it. She's looking down. It's not, knowing now what you know, this picture takes on different meanings. Another picture. So, we get to trial, and we have to put on Courtney's case first. And Courtney's case does not have pictures. It does. I mean, I have a couple of team photos. I have things like that. But the one thing I do have is Courtney's a very sweet girl. And one of the things that I think is really heartbreaking, but also was actually kind of helpful in our case is Courtney never had a boyfriend after Mel Hall. She could not separate the abuse from a normal relationship. And so she just shut that down. That part of her life was just shut down. So I didn't have to worry about what we oftentimes have to worry about, which is a kid that becomes very promiscuous or all these other things. Like, that was it. Courtney's entire sexual experiences included Mel Hall. That was it. So that was pretty helpful, but they're coming in deciding to discredit the victim, because that is every defense strategy ever in a kid case. They're also playing on the celebrity. The whole idea of, well, I mean, they're only saying this because, you know, he's Mel Hall. And once again, we combated that with the idea of, once again, Courtney is not a criminal mastermind who started setting this up 10 years ago. And then, of course, they're claiming motive. They did claim money, which was laughable, but they also claimed that she's out for publicity. This girl who I could barely get to talk is out for publicity. Come on, who spent the whole trial, testified, head down, hair down, couldn't get her. I'll never forget, as a prosecutor, these are the moments where you're like, ooh. We're walking in the courtroom, like, I called her to stand, we're walking in the courtroom, and she just stops at the door, and she's like, I'm not doing this. And I was like, oh, yeah, we are. And I started using, like, every coach analogy I could think of. I was like, we're in the third quarter. We got to finish the game. I mean, like, everything I could think of to get her in the game. And then finally, I just put her up there, and I think we talked about basketball for about 30 minutes, because I needed to get her calmed down. So we talked about basketball. And the jury was like, get it, she plays basketball. But until I could finally see her take a breath for the first time, like, that's what you have to do. And so there are moments that you wish everyone could see your vantage point, because I remember we got through our part, and the defense started questioning her, and I froze. I didn't breathe. I never breathe, really, when kids are getting crossed. But there was a moment where you could see it in Courtney, where, like, the athlete came out in her, where she was like, you're not going to say that about me. And she started to fight back in cross. She didn't just lay down and take it. And I had tears in my eyes, because I didn't think she was going to be able to do it. And she did. And when she got the stand, I thought, we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. They didn't land a punch that helped them. We're going to be okay. And so, you know, one of the things we were dealing with is this idea of celebrity. And I remember this because I laughed about it. The defense was issuing all these subpoenas, and I don't know if you can read it, but the defense was issuing all these subpoenas, and, like, this one is for Deion Sanders and Don Mattingly and all these people. Well, they never served them. They were just issuing them to try to, like, scare me. Once again, not a baseball fan, don't care. And so one of my favorite things I did during trial, and this is just for my own benefit, is just to piss Mel Hall off. Every time we'd take a break, I would purposely use like really awfully bad sports analogies to remind him I didn't care that he was a sports celebrity. I'd be like, 2 strikes and you're out. Like I would just nonstop do it. And I would see him just get angrier and angrier. I was like, Because one of the things as a prosecutor, you've got to remind people whose courtroom it is. It's not yours, Mr. Celebrity, it's mine. And so I was kind of trying to taunt him to take the stand, because if he took the stand, I knew I could get into other victims. I knew he'd screwed up. He ultimately never took the stand, so that didn't work. But every break, I would just, they were terrible. Like, that's a 2-pointer in football, like just nasty stuff. People were like, that's not real. I was like, I know. So, give closing arguments, and God bless. Guilty. And in 90 minutes, by the way. Pretty proud about that, because I thought we were going to be out for a long time. And it comes in kind of late in the evening, so the next morning we're going to start punishment. And so we gather everyone, and we're like, okay, here comes the show. Because now I know the jury, the jury's made a tough decision, it's hard, but they only know about Courtney. And they're about to be blown out of their mind. So we start bringing in girl after girl. One of the most important things I always like to talk about before I do that is when I brought Courtney in the next morning, it was a different kid that walked in the door. I've never in my career, and I've done hundreds of these cases, but I have never in my career seen a kid physically change, like she physically changed after that verdict. Because she had been holding that in for so long and convinced that no one would believe her. And when she walked in the next morning when we were starting punishment, her shoulder was back, her hair was out of her face, her skin looked different. I don't know how to describe it. Like, she walked in the room and I didn't recognize her at first. I was like, and I had to go back. Like, I've never seen anything like it. And for her journey, this was huge. Like, she ultimately got her first boyfriend after this. She asked me, she's like, can I bring him by to meet you? I was like, well, does he know who I am to you? Because just checking. But it does. It matters. It matters when a jury validates what you've been told is untrue. Like when they say no, you are not what everyone said, which is no one's going to believe you, no one's going to care, all of these things. When a jury goes, someone does, it matters. So we start. So I want to give this example. We did this with every girl, but this was huge for us in trial. We would make these timelines with our evidence and our photos to remind the jury of really how long and devastating this molestation was. And we had one of these for every girl, and then at punishment, we had one that had everyone on it. And it took up, it was longer than this table. But to stand in front of a jury and just say, you want to know what his life's work is? It's not a batting average, it's this, was really huge. And so as a prosecutor, when you're in front of a jury, you've got to think about what visually works. And this really worked for us. We have an amazing trial tech in our office. Her name is Rona. And I always come to her, I'm like, okay, so here's kind of what I'm thinking. And then she comes up with these beautiful things. But, they had seen them come up one at a time with each victim. But then when we got to closing and we had the full picture, you saw the jury go, oh my gosh. So, we got 45 years. So, I did not see that coming, I will tell you. The only person in the room who didn't see that coming was Mel Hall. He was very surprised. 45 years. In Texas, he was convicted on what's called a 3G offense, which means he has to serve at least half before he's eligible for parole. So he's still in there. But the aftermath, and this is really where Chaz and I want to hopefully give you all some lessons. There were a couple of things that came out of this that were hard. Because there was celebrity, there was a website that went up. And the website had named our victims. We had to get them to take it down. Like, we're not going to let you put their names out in the public. Because these girls were 22, 23. They were just starting careers. They were just starting families. Luckily, that worked. We didn't have to take much legal action. But it is against the law to release a victim's name without their consent from a sexual assault case. So we managed to get them to shut that off. Now, the website's still up. There's a whole page on hating me. There's a whole page on hating the judge. It's all up there. It's being run by, wait for it, one of his ex-wives. Letters. Some of the girls, Katie in particular, started getting letters. She had gotten engaged, and the week after her engagement ran in the newspaper, she got a letter that said, basically, does your fiancé know what a line you are? And it was from a Mel Hall fan. That same person showed up at her house. That same person has since married him in prison. I'll never get that, by the way, for as long as I do this. Why marry people in prison? I don't get it. And then, of course, the internet trolling. Like, just like what we were dealing about when we were trying to find Chaz, everyone has their opinion. And they have opinions based on no facts and no actual information, but they sure are willing to give it. And that's hurtful. It's hurtful for these girls who have just literally had to lay it all out there, and then someone who's sitting in their pajamas in their mom's basement is going to say, you know what these girls are. But that's part of what we have to deal with. We were very lucky in that a couple of years ago, a man by the name of Greg Hanlon, and y'all have the article, wanted to write a story. And the reason he wanted to write a story was this, and this is kind of the funny Michael Jackson angle. So we had all of this celebrity going on. Like, everyone's like, okay, the New York Times is going to come, whatever. So we get our verdict on, I don't remember what day, but like 3 days later, Michael Jackson died. And so no one cared about our verdict anymore. And so Greg Hanlon's like, I think it got buried pretty fast. And I told him why. And he's like, oh, that's right. That did happen at the same time. And he goes, I was interviewing one of Mel Hall's old teammates. And he said something to the effect of, yeah, I heard he got in a little bit of trouble. And Greg Hanlon was like, a little bit of trouble? Like, this isn't a DWI. Like, he sexually assaulted children. And so Greg Hanlon, who is a sports nut and loves a good sports story, was like, you know what, this story needs to be told. And it was actually, I think, pretty cathartic for all of us, because it had been years since the trial. We got to kind of come back together and see kind of the aftermath. And then that's when, for me, realizing as a prosecutor, you don't always get the couple years later update. You just don't. You end the trial, that's it. You don't know. And so for me, what I have taken away most from this trial is getting to follow these girls and coming back together with them and finding out what the journey's like. And I think for Chaz, that is really the key to why she's here. Talking about where do you go from this? Because she walked into trial, and we talked about it a ton, but sitting down and I looked her in the eye and I said, this was abuse. And I was the first person who had ever said that to her. And so yes, it's been years and years and years since the abuse, but she's dealing with it like it just happened, because it's the first time it's gotten the name it deserved. And so I'm going to have Chaz talk to you a little bit about the aftermath of coming in and seeing this person that you haven't seen in 20 years and testifying against them.
Yes. So, first of all, let me just thank my husband, because God gave me a very amazing man. Like some of the girls after Mel Hall, I didn't want to date anyone, and I certainly didn't want to get married. And then I fell in love with Jesus, and then I fell in love with my husband. And he was the most patient, long-suffering counselor. And many times he was the one just pulling things out of me and just like, I just want you to know that wasn't healthy. I just want you to know that that's not right and that's not acceptable. And also one that courted me and treated me completely different. And we had a wonderful courtship and have an incredible marriage. And if it was not for him, I wouldn't be able to talk about this, because I'm a barrier, and most people that are victimized vary, because it's not a fun topic. I mean, who wants to talk? Like, you're going to go out to Starbucks and talk about being sexually abused. No one does that. So, it's helpful to start the process. It was very helpful for me to start the process with my husband, and he had such a good listening ear, and he also asked so many questions. And when I'd answer these questions, I'd just be like, oh my gosh, this is not a dysfunctional relationship. This is more than that. So I just want to thank you for, I don't like to fly. So we drove to Texas for the trial. We have 3 kids. I never leave them. We never leave them. So this is the second time we've ever left them. The first time was the trial. The second time is now. So anyway,
my favorite Stuart part of the story, though, is this. So I meet him obviously at trial, and Chaz is up there giving her testimony, and we had gotten to, honestly, the part about that her parents had let him move into the master bedroom. And I heard someone get up and walk. I was like, oh, that's Stuart. I was just like, and I turned around my investigator. I was like, tell him to go further down the hall to yell. And he's on the phone.
He called my mom. Yes.
Move further down the hall.
We didn't even finish the testimony. He was on the phone with my mom. Just, how could you? And she was still defending, her decisions. And because you know what? My parents were victimized too. And for them, they can't admit it because the crime against their daughter is so heavy. They know it. But they still, in that phone call, she wants to defend it because then if she admits it, then she has to deal with that. And again, they don't want to deal with that. No one wants to talk about that. So the aftermath, when we went to Dallas, and I was going for this dysfunctional relationship and now figuring out this guy's a pedophile, when I walked in the door and sat at the table with Kim and Christy, the prosecutors, one of the first things she says is, you were victimized. This is sexual abuse. And I have thought that, but the validation is what a victim needs to hear because you sometimes think you're crazy. Sometimes you're told you're crazy. Sometimes you're told you're dramatic. Sometimes you're told, these are all things I was told, just get over it. Just get over it. Just move on. And so hearing from a person in authority, a law enforcement, a person, a prosecutor, that was huge for me to know, okay, this is real and I need to deal with this. Then when you see that he was guilty and then you see he's got 45 years and it's significant, and then you hear prosecutors in closing defend you. And it was not my trial. It was a trial of these young girls. But in this trial, one of the things she said that I'll always remember, and victims want validation and they want someone to defend them. She said, the Yankees didn't do anything. The principal didn't do anything. The sheriff didn't do anything. Her parents didn't do anything, but the state of Texas, did something. And that was huge. So we went home, and then it was like, okay, now we got to deal with this. And what do? I want to bury it. And I really am like, that was exhausting, and that was a lot. And so I'm a mom, and I'm trying to just move and bury it, and I don't want to deal with it. But it would come up, and it would come up in our marriage, and I had trust issues as far as like, are you looking out for my best interest and this and that? And so at one point we decided to go to marriage counseling, and I was convinced it was his fault. And the marriage counselor said, I really think you need in-depth counseling, and you need to go sort through what happened when you were younger. That's where we're going to start here. And I realized it was really about me. And I went into this in-depth counseling. I did not want to do it. I really was sick of the topic. I was sick of hearing his name. I was sick of And so they showed me in counseling, they had a big board and we would write on a black Sharpie on white paper and what happened. And she would literally write, molested, in our bedroom, things that happened in the bedroom. And then she was like, how did it make you feel? And I see things like a horror and, very intense counseling. And then you get to the end and what you're dealing with personally, relationally, with your family, with your mother, the relationship with my mother. The whole counseling became about my relationship with my mother. It had nothing to do with Mel Hall. It really was about that relationship, and I had never really dealt with that. So I come out of that counseling free, and I felt like I could forgive my mother if we never acknowledge it or talk about it, that I had closure with it. And to me, as a victim, I think of people that are victimized by whether it's the uncle, the father, the baseball player, the people that allowed it was the worst offense for me. And so that had to be dealt with. And so then I felt more whole, and I was able to talk about it more, and I started understanding my value and my worth. And it wasn't what my mother thought of me or what my father thought of me or what is just smiling and look pretty meant. Dealing with that I was more than that. And so it was investing in who I was, and who I was in Christ was a huge part. And I started growing, and I started maturing, and I thought in the back of my mind, I would always hear Mel say, "You will be nothing without me. You think you could leave me? You're nothing. You'll never be." I didn't graduate from high school because we were at spring training, and it wasn't important if I graduated. It was important I was at spring training. So I kept thinking, well, how will I do anything? I don't even have a diploma. Didn't go to college. I actually did go to college, and I lied and said I graduated, and I felt bad because I became a Christian that I was lying, and I got kicked out. So, I mean, what am I ever going to do? And God started showing me that I had gifts, and I had talent, and I had value, and I started a design business, and it became successful. And it was more than a business for me. It was God showing me my value and worth, and that's what victims don't know. And that's why they are easy prey and targets, because they don't know who they are, and they don't know their worth. And so we started this design business, and we opened a store. And and this is important just to share, when I opened the store, I was really thinking about a name, and I didn't want it to be my name, because I was just like, it was to me never about a business. It's like what God has done in my life, and that there's this process of refinement in my life. And it was just layers and layers of going through it, kind of exhausting and emotional, and going through it in my marriage and with my children. I'm like, this is more. It's more about what God has done. I'm thinking about a name, and I'm at the table with the people that work with me, and I said, I feel like this company should be called Linen and Flax. And, as I had been praying about this company and really thinking about the vision that, yes, it's about homes, but when people invite you into your homes, it's more than that. And it's telling people's story, and it's always important that your story, how it affects people and inspires people, basically what I went through, but also sharing it for good. I want this to be involved. And the guy that was with us, that's doing the branding, he didn't really know my big story, but he knew that I was a Christian. He knew that I wanted to honor God with my business. So my assistant was there, and the girls that were with me know my story. And so he's typing, and he's like, well, why do you feel linen and flax? I'm like, well, I just feel like, that's kind of how my style is. It's linen, and the color is flax, but I feel like it's just telling a story. I don't know what. And he's Googling, and he looks up flax. Because he goes, what's flax? Like, I know it's a grain, but I don't really understand. He looks it up, and he says, it's the process of refinement. And the picture was, when you pull flax, nobody would pull it. I mean, it's not attractive. It's ugly. It looks dead, actually. And they take that flax, and then they go through this laborious process, and they kind of beat it down, and they strip it of everything. And then that flax becomes this beautiful linen. And so for victims, it's like we were beaten down. You're stripped of everything. It's humiliating. You want to bury it because you feel this sense of shame. But when you release it and you go through the process, and it's laborious and it's hard, and you see terrible words on a board that are about your mother and your father and your life. But when you strip it of everything, it comes out to be something beautiful. And that's like the girls that were involved in this crime. They have stories. They're married. They have children. They're making something beautiful, something terrible. He doesn't have power over us. Mel Hall has nothing to do with my daily life. It is the aftermath of what God has done in my life through this. And so our company, Linen and Flax, it continues to grow, and my platform of this company is to share my story. And it's never talking about Mel Hall. It's talking about when bad things happen, beautiful things come out of that. So I hope when you face your victims, because 1 in 5 girls are victimized. I think it's 16% of girls ages 9 to 14 are victimized just in 1 year in the United States. We have opened our home and our hearts to young girls. I have a 14-year-old daughter. We have a 15-year-old son, 14-year-old daughter, 11-year-old baby boy. And when she became, 10 and 12, and now she's 14, almost the age I was when this happened, I would say to my husband, we've got to just talk about this. So we talk very openly and frankly about sex in our home and about do people touch you and coaches, and because everyone to me is a predator at this point. So we talk about it a lot. We're very open about it. And so I said, I want to start this Bible study, and we're going to have middle school and high school girls. We feel like middle school is important because high school's too late. It's happening. It's happening in 8th grade. It's happening in 7th grade. I was a freshman. And so we opened our homes. I shared with my children my story. Really with my 2 oldest. My 11-year-old knows something happened, but not to the degree. He's too young. But I shared it with our children, and they handled it so well. And we've opened our homes, and the purpose of that is to talk to young girls and for them to have a safe place to pull me aside after and talk to me and say this is happening, because they don't want to talk to their parents. They're embarrassed or they feel ashamed. So we've had several. We meet on Friday nights. where after our Bible study, they'll pull me aside and they'll cry and they'll say, this is what happened in my basement with another person, another boy. And they open up and they want to talk, and we talk about social media, how completely dangerous it is. Helpful, I'm sure, to you all, but so completely dangerous. And I can't imagine if we had social media. Maybe in some ways it could have helped more if someone would have said something, but also it's just so damaging. So my purpose has really been about how can I talk to girls, and that is when I talked to Kim. I said, listen, I've been invited to talk to a few schools in our area. I love it. It's one of my favorite things to do because I feel like there's got to be some type of value in a bad experience. But let me just talk to them because they need to know that they can say no, that they have the power, that they are good, that they are strong, and try to build in their self-esteem and self-worth. And that's when I called Kim and said, if you ever have opportunities, I'd love to share as well. So that's why we're here, and I hope it's helped. Knowing what to look at in your victims when you see them across the table, and just hearing them and validating them is huge in their continued journey after the abuse, because it never goes away. It's always there.
And on that note, we just, what Chaz says is so important. Having talked to so many victims in my career, and those of you that do it know, and even I was really struck yesterday during Mary Ann's presentation about that video, because it is a really graphic demonstration of how predators get to victims. They get to victims because the victim doesn't know their own worth. Mm-hmm. And so we as a society, as parents, as friends, as all of it, we've got to get back in there and help our girls, and it's usually girls, it is sometimes boys, but help our girls regain their footing on community and family and safety, because they're losing that. They're losing it to believing that an internet comment is more important than their friend telling them that they matter. Because, you always hear, what is it, that it takes 10 good comments to erase one bad comment? Our kids are inundated with the bad comments, and they are absolute prey. I am here to tell you as a prosecutor, the predator doesn't have to sleep on your couch anymore. And that is horrifying. These guys will find these girls looking for validation with a click of a mouse. And they find them all day long. And we've got to do a better job in society of helping these girls not want that, not need that, because they're missing something if they're looking for that. As a community, and this is actually, I put it in the end of it, I think we added it to the slogan, but it was funny because I just was looking up like coaches and sexual assault, and it was funny, like I read through this list, I was like, this is everything Mel Hall did. Spend a lot of time with her, try to be alone with her, give her gifts, try to control her even off the field. Like, they have a game plan, we know it. Let's start realizing that we know their game. Let's use it against them. And the best thing we can do goes back to what I talked about with people see stuff. And we've got to quit believing this idea like it's none of our business. Because if you get a gut feeling, if something about that relationship is wrong, do something. Because you don't want a prosecutor walking in a couple years later and you guessing, oh crap, I knew that was going on. And you didn't do anything. And I've watched people melt down in front of me as that realization kind of overtook them. I work with kids all the time. I volunteer at a bunch of different organizations. I know what it means to work with kids. Chaz knows what it means to work with kids. You can have a healthy relationship. I feel like sometimes people think, I think everyone who works with kids is a predator. I work in children's organizations. I know that's not true. I know people give and are wonderful with children. But you can tell the difference between a good, healthy mentorship where we're having a conversation, but I'm still the mentor and you're still the mentee, and these guys. Because these guys are treating them like they're friends. That's what you see. That's what you can see on the outside. You don't have to see the sexual assault to know that it's just a little bit weird how he's treating that girl. It makes me uncomfortable. We've got to start listening to our gut on the uncomfortable part and do something. Because they may not have a voice until they're out of college, till they're 38 years old. They may not have a voice. And when they don't have a voice, more victims happen. So we have to help these girls find their voice. So we thank y'all so much for listening to our story. Thank you. Oh.
Questions, and I have one.
Oh.
Could Could you talk a little bit more about the Yankees, kind of what they knew about this? Because
they did nothing.
but the spring training?
Oh.
I think the moms made some comments. Some of that stuff or you or Chaz, either one could talk about that.
Yeah, they knew. Everyone knew. We were. Can y'all hear me? Do I need to put this back on? So we were staying at Dion's house, flying to Atlanta, staying with him. We were shopping on every road trip. All the wives would get together and we'd all shop. I was going to baby showers. Everyone knew we were spending time with them all the time. You become like this little weird family, and I was the fiance. So everyone knew it was a legit relationship. The Yankees knew you had to go into the Yankee office to get your pass to get in. So every day I passed through and got my pass for myself, my parents, the police chief when he wanted to come, and my teachers. So it was known. We started, the first game was 15, and that whole, through summer we went, and it was very obvious, very quick, that where we were sitting, and that season went through October, and then spring training was February. I didn't go to the first spring training because I was still in school, but then every game that they came back once, like end of April, I was at every game, and I was not allowed to miss a game because he was very superstitious.
When we first, like when Sandusky happened, I remember people were just astonished, like, how could this happen? And an organization could know and cover it up. And I was like, like that's the more typical response. It just is.
I had a question for you. Yeah. Did you notice any change in his behavior towards you as you got older?
Well, he was dressing me. That was important, that I looked older, which okay. I saw one of those pictures. Like, you can see the transformation. I think I was in heels the last picture in a short dress. He would send me, if he was on a road trip, send boxes of clothes. I was surprised that there was always heels and, like, short dresses when I was with him, and I felt like it was an attempt for me to look older. But with him, just more controlling as we were in the relationship longer. More possessive. He was very, very, very possessive, and that was more. I was managing the sexual acts initially, but then I started managing the mental stuff more so towards the end.
And our girls talked about the same thing. Like, I know Courtney talked very specifically about he would grab her face and demand that he tell her that she loved her, and I think it took her a decade and a half to be able to say I love you to someone and mean it again, because that was the control of that. Like, it's more than, sexual abuse is more than the physical sexual act. It's about the dynamic of control. And so he was using the same things on these girls. It was just not quite as out in the open.
And one of the notes that she put into evidence, which is interesting because we moved to Atlanta right before the trial, and I had this box, and we had moved since we had been married, maybe twice. We had moved to our first house and then to Atlanta. And we had this box, and it was like a box this big, and it had photographs, and it had some of these cards and what I called proof. The ring receipt I kept because I thought nobody would believe me. I never thought there was a trial. But I always felt like if something came out, if he would deny it, that I would be called the liar. And so when we would come across this box cleaning out the garage, I looked at my husband, I'm like, just get rid of it. Just get rid of it. And he's like, yeah, I don't know. And I'm like, yeah, it might be proof. We had no idea. But he's like, no, this guy's not getting away with it. And I always felt like one day I'm going to tell him that I understand the dynamics of the relationship, not that he was a pedophile, but one day I'm going to run into him at the airport, which I don't even fly. But I was convinced that's where I was going to run into him. And I'm going to tell him, I know what you did to me. And God just took it a whole nother step further and gave me an opportunity to sit on a witness stand where he couldn't say nothing and lie and get out of what was real. And I even had the moment to say, I know what you did to me. And I pointed at him, and that was all I needed to say. I wanted to say it to his face that I get it, because he would always twist what I thought was real, and then I would believe it. They really play mental games. And so when you say, how do people stay in this? They mess with you mentally more than the physical became such a crime to me, because I would know what was right, but then I would believe him that I guess I'm wrong. And you dismiss everything you feel.
I have the microphone. Good morning. Chaz, thank you for sharing this very difficult period in your life with us. Two-part question. Chaz, what is your present relationship with your parents? And Kim, at what point does the law go after parents for allowing something like this to happen?
That's a great question. I think that's every parent's fear in this situation. Initially, I was telling Kim last night over dinner, when I told my parents I was going to go to Texas, I just wanted them to know, I was going to Texas and I'm going to testify. She kind of implemented fear and said, what if he doesn't get charged? He's going to come after you and kill you. And I was like, oh gosh, what about that? And then she would say, and I don't think you should do it. I mean, you will embarrass your brother. Your brother's very successful, and if this comes out, it would be really embarrassing. And that was probably the most hurtful thing out of the entire experience, because it was not validating what I was feeling, that I needed closure so I could move on with my family and my life, because I wasn't successful. It wasn't okay. So that kind of propelled me. And I remember going to church one Sunday after those comments, and it was dealing with fear and not letting fear hold you back from doing the right thing. And I was like, we're going to Texas. So, but that relationship with my mom was very turbulent, troubling. I have 3 kids that didn't really know anything, and they're the only grandparents alive. And so it was so important to me that my children had grandparents, so I kind of protected my parents. But it had to be resolved because my kids would not understand, why are you so mad at mom? Why do you fight with mom all the time? We call her mom. And so then after I went to counseling, I forgave her in that counseling. I had a moment with my counselor as if she was my mother. It was like a very heavy, difficult time. And I will tell you, when I walked out of those doors, there was no angst anymore. It was resolved. It was dealt with. Months again of counseling. And so now, my husband can attest, to say it doesn't bother me, that would be a lie. It doesn't affect me in my daily struggles. I can talk to her. I can kind of put it in a box and be okay with it. And when she comes to visit, I'm wise with boundaries, like only so long to visit, and certain things we just don't talk about. But it's good. It's good, and it's really for the sake of my kids. My kids know what Grandma did to a degree, and so they understand why I have to have some boundaries. But it's a functional relationship. I adore my father. My father, on the way back from Texas, called because I guess it had hit the papers and people were calling them. And my mom was upset and angry, and you shamed everybody. And my father got on the phone, and he could barely speak, weeping, just saying how sorry he was. And being validated, because they're saying, we didn't know it happened. You don't put your daughter in that situation. So for me, it was like, just come clean. You did know, but, that was a hard thing for me. And so my father gave me enough, just begging for my forgiveness. And he really didn't have to beg. Him acknowledging it was what I needed. Totally great with my father, for whatever reason. I feel like he tried to stop it. But healthy boundaries with my mother and able to function.
We, during trial, there was a moment that always stands out to me, because the defense attorney kind of went after the idea, like, you must be lying because there's no way that your parents would be complicit in this. I know as a prosecutor that is untrue. There are lots of times that parents are complicit in it, or they purposely look the other way, would be probably the better way to say it. They never asked her, did you have sex? They just went, I'm not going to ask. I'm going to purposely not ask. But there was a moment where the defense attorney was kind of going after that idea, like, this can't be true because your parents would never do this. And I remember Chaz looked at her and said, well, ma'am, that's why I'm here alone today. And you could just tell the defense attorney was like, ooh, because she expected some justifications, because that's what normally happens. We try, because they're still our loved ones, and we still want to protect them. And so you try. But when Chaz just looked her straight in the eye and said, I'm here alone, that's why, because my parents and I do have a problem over this. It was a big moment in that you could feel the air leave the defense. Like, well, that was our best shot. To your question about charging, obviously this was a Connecticut case, so I wouldn't have had any kind of jurisdiction for what happened there. For our girls, none of the parents really rose to the level where they had, these parents were broken by their misguided faith in this man, but they didn't know. But I have certainly had cases where I have people who absolutely knew or purposely tried not to know. I have on occasion charged a mother as a party. In particular, I had a case where the mother kept getting the daughter abortions after dad got her pregnant, and I charged her as a party. She had 4 before she was 18. So on cases like that, you have to. Unfortunately, that's not, well, I guess fortunately, that's the extreme. Generally, when I'm trying to decide if I'm going to charge a mother, and it's usually a mother, there's so many extra issues that I really have to gut check what am I going to get out of it. Because, like, let's say I do a failure to report. That's a misdemeanor in Texas. The kid who I need to have access for trial, if I've charged mom as well, like, mom may be a piece of crap, but it's her mom. And if I take away mom, I lose my benefit. I mean, I have to go, that's a misdemeanor against mom. It's a first-degree felony against dad. I got to focus. And so it kind of depends. I have charged moms. I usually only do it if I know the kid is out of the home and is safe. And I have a moment where I can point to a jury and, like, this is how this person knew. So.
And let me just add to that. One of the things with my mom, I think going through the counseling, but also she was victimized too. It's not letting her off by any degree. But he was a master manipulator. And when you see the pattern that he continued to do it, I do look at it, and I almost feel I wish they would go to counseling, but they were definitely, when a husband gives up his role as the head of the house, and, he became like the dad, the father, he was calling my mother, mother, they were victimized as well. So I have a little bit of compassion and mercy for that. I feel like they were duped. I was duped. Do they have responsibility? Of course, and that's where I had to come to a place of forgiving. Because otherwise you're just eating up with it. It just had to go that way. And it's very helpful.
Once you got the guilty verdict, were you treated differently by society? So when you told people prior to that, I know that, like you said, people hesitate to believe, but once you actually had a guilty verdict, were you treated different?
Well, a lot of people in my community, because I didn't talk about it a lot, didn't really know. I just really didn't talk about it really until lately. But what my husband protected me from is what was out there on the web. And he always said, and I never looked, that just don't Google Mel Hall and don't Google your name. Because when I did later, further down the road, and I can't remember when we did, I was terrified. Because, they were saying, first of all, calling me a whore, and they were a money grubber. And when we went to Texas, we never said, where are we going to get out of this? It was such a twist on what was really happening.
I've seen his bank account, nothing.
Yes,
nothing.
I mean, there was never that. We were never inclined. So, online, I don't want my kids to Google it because there's so much hate they have, but there's so much hateful stuff towards me of people that defend him, and I think his ex-wife, which is interesting because he left her during this time, but she is one of his biggest defenders. And it's so interesting to me, but she puts a lot of hateful things out there. So I just try not to look at it. I rarely do. I think when the Greg Canlin thing came out, that piece is the first time that I saw, and I just got it out of my headspace and never looked at it again. My husband would see it, and he would say, hey, why don't you check in with Kim, make sure he's not getting paroled or anything, things like that. Can we just check in there? So, but no, I haven't been treated differently. If anything, it's been such a great opportunity to share, because to me, my most important thing other than my family is my faith. And to share my faith and show that the only thing, you can put someone in jail, but it does not fix or make you whole. So it's showing what God has done in my life has been the greatest part of this story. And really quick, and then we're going to come right to you, really quick was Mel Hall, when he was in spring training, had a pastor that would come in and teach the Yankees, and he gave him a Bible. And I remember Mel coming to the house saying, hey, this pastor came in and had this Bible, and I'm like, we should go to church. I feel like we should go to church, because I always felt like it was wrong and I need to fix what was happening. And we never did, and so ended up going to church. And so then I ended up serving, going to Bible college until I told him I was a liar and that I didn't graduate. So then, and I ended up working at that church and serving, and the pastor came up to me a couple of years after, and he goes, hey, were you in a relationship with Mel Hall? And I hadn't told anybody. And I said, yes, like, how did you know? And he said, well, when I would go to the clubhouse, all the Yankees would joke about Mel Hall met his fiancée at Toys R Us because she was so young. And it was like the joke. Because when people were joking, my heart was breaking, and me and my wife went into the stands and we prayed for your salvation. And he said, I went to one spring training game. It was senior skip day. My friends wanted to go. So we all went, and it was the one game I went to. And that pastor was there, and he saw me, and he saw Mel bringing me over to the dugout, sitting on the first seat next to the dugout so he could supervise. And he's like, this girl needs to get out of this relationship. And he prayed for my salvation. Sure enough, I end up at that church. I used that Bible, because it was the only Bible we had in the house, and he officiated our wedding. And that's just kind of a side note. Isn't that cool? I love that.
Yes, we have 2 questions from online. The first one is from Travis Smith, and he asked, can you talk about your experience with the police when you reported this incident?
With me?
Yeah.
When I never reported it until we heard about it on ESPN, and then that's when I called our police chief, who was not the one that was our friend at the time, and called to speak with the police, and they told me the time had passed. Statutes of limitations had run out because it was almost 20 years after, or 15 or 20 years after. So, and that's when I got involved with meeting Kim.
And the second question is from Nancy Burke Bradley out of Ohio. Chaz, did your parents at any time possibly mention any gut suspicions that were dismissed?
Well, they would say things like, when people would ask, so what's happening? I mean, he's moved in with you. He lives here. He put a pool in the backyard because he didn't want me to go to the beach any longer. Like, what is going on? And I'd say, he loves her so much. Nothing is happening. That was like every time someone would ask, like, what's going on? Nothing is happening, just so you know. He's waiting till she's 18 because he loves her so much because she's pure. Red flag. He loves her so much because she's pure, but nothing is happening. He's so good, and I encourage him to actually go and sleep with other women so he doesn't sleep with my daughter. And so when I would say, Mom, I think he's like sleeping with other women, she would say, that's great, because we don't want him touching you. So it was because I knew that he's every night touching me. And then my mother is like, please go in front of me, sleep with other women. But then he's sleeping upstairs with me in the master bedroom. It was just very confusing. So to answer that question, I think in their head they want to say nothing's happening. It's better if he does something outside because nothing's really happening here because he's a good guy. He's waiting.
Chaz said something very important a few minutes ago that I think is really important for those of us that are in the business, which is, the trial is not closure in the way, if we want to think, yay, he's in prison, you're done. But there's so much that comes after that, especially because most abusers are someone they know. It's a relative or it's a person that they knew and trusted and loved. And it's a very confusing issue for kids and adults. And we've got to get better services. Chaz did the work to be here and be good and to be healthy and to be a role model. But a lot of our victims walk out of trial and they have this idea like, all right, cool, that part's done, so I'm going to be fine now. And that's not true because the trial doesn't change all the stuff that victims are going through, all the dynamics of families, all the dynamics of shame and all of that. And we've got to get these girls into counseling and get them on their journey. Chaz was a self-motivator, but a lot of people aren't. And the only time they're going to be talking about their sexual abuse is when they're sitting in front of law enforcement. And so we're the ones that need to do the encouraging. Get them into counseling. Get your victim assistance coordinators to help them get the help they need because you leave them in a very raw state. At the end of a trial, it is very, very raw. And it's confusing because they feel like they should feel better, and they don't. So.
And your gut is to just put a Band-Aid and just say, okay, I did the trial, we're good. And you're just not good because it does take a lot of work. And it takes people around you, like my husband, really great friends, our small group, where I would learn more layers. We'd be in a small group and something would be said and I'd just be bawling. And I'm really not a crier. It happened today, but because little things would trigger it. There's lots of triggers that you just don't expect. So talking is the best thing. Letting people feel safe and validated and heard. I think that's it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Chaz and Kim. I think we can all give them another round of applause. That takes a lot of courage. We have very small tokens of our appreciation to give you. That's a little gift that will help you remember Charleston. And